Welcome to the Wild and Fierce podcast. We are your hosts, Amber
and Johanna. We're here to explore womanhood through real, raw, and unfiltered conversations.
Please remember this podcast is for education only and not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult your own healthcare professional.
Let's dive in.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Wild and Fierce podcast, episode 4.
Woo-hoo!
Feels wild to say episode 4.
Wild and fierce.
Exactly. So we're going to kick this off with just a little life update from both myself and Johanna, just about what we've been up to. And then we're going to jump into a fun topic. We're going to talk all things pelvic floor 101. And I will explain much more about that after I do my short little update. So fun thing in our house, we got back just a few days ago from 2 weeks in Maui, which was an absolute dream. It was so much fun. For anyone listening that has been on vacation with kids, though, it was like relaxing but equally challenging.
Yeah. You like need a nap when you get home.
Yeah. That whole cliche saying of like you need a vacation from your vacation, I definitely felt that. We had an amazing time. The weather was perfect. We were super blessed and we stayed at a place like right on the water. So we had the beach and the pool. And it was
You were in Maui, right?
We were in Maui. Yep. And it was super fun because when we went 2 years ago, my daughter was 3 and my son was only 3 months old. So he was teeny and I was obviously very freshly postpartum. So it was a whole new experience this time because my son could like run around, Bo could play and do all the things. And I wasn't like had him strapped on me compared to last time. I had him in a baby carrier, or I was nursing him, or he was sleeping. So this was just a whole.
You're so fresh off of birth.
Yeah, which when I say it now, it like sounds crazy to say when he was that young, but it was honestly the perfect age in some sense because he just and chilled and it was so he was relatively easy. So it was fun, but it was cool now.
Isn't that funny to like look back and you're like, that was kind of crazy that I did that, but it's okay.
It was. It was kind of crazy, but it was fun now to look back at like the photos of last time compared to this time and how much more he could do and see him playing and then him and Emmy playing together was so cool. So that was super fun. It did take us.
What was like your favorite thing that you did?
So Johanna and I share a fear of dark water.
I didn't know that you didn't like it either.
Petrified.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so if you don't know, I share about it a lot on Instagram. I like deep fear. Yeah, that's right. I remember you saying that about Chelan. Okay, yeah. Deep fear of dark water. Like to the point when I was a kid, like even the deep end of the pool, I would like start thinking crazy things that like something was gonna get me.
Yep.
But yeah, like deep fear, it got a little bit better when I got a little bit older. Like I could rationalize things a little bit more, but I do have a pretty like expressive imagination. And it will take over, and I will absolutely think that like a sturgeon or some sort of lake monster is gonna get me in the water. And then like in the ocean, like have you guys seen those pictures and videos of like the creatures?
Oh, yeah.
That are down in the ocean? Oh.
I see, for me, it's a shark. So that was honestly my favorite thing. I actually went snorkeling, not like out far, but like enough that for me, this was a growth moment, you guys. Like we rented snorkel stuff. I swam out to these rocks. I snorkeled. I still stayed like I made sure there was people around me. I would not go by myself. But you know that moment where you go to swim back into shore and you're so afraid that when you look out that like a shark's gonna be coming. I still had those moments, but I was very proud of myself. So that was honestly my favorite part. Was actually going
to swim away from shore and you're like, there's a shark behind you.
Yeah, I would swim like sideways so I could still see. Yeah, it was silly. But that was probably my favorite part. It was so cool. I saw all these fish and coral and it was amazing. Sai swam with two turtles. I wasn't that lucky.
I thought you were gonna say sharks and I was like, oh my God.
Turtles. See sharks in the back of my mind. Turtles. So that was cool for him. We got footage of that. So that was probably my favorite part. But then coming home, like we all needed a few days to recuperate and time change and that whole thing. So that was Hawaii. And then my only other super fun update, if you're local in my area, I do something fun. I do these little like pop-up series. I call them babies, bumps, and dumbbells. So I had my first class today. We had a whole 16 mamas and little kiddos that showed up. So it's a super fun class for all the local gals and their kids. And it was exhausting and like chaotic, but so fun. And the sense of community that we get to build is really, really cool. So if you're local when you're listening and you're interested in some of these classes, let me know because
Do mamas wear the littles, or what do the littles
it's
do?
both.
Okay.
So some moms, it's super cute. I'll share footage here if you're following me on social media, not long, but we have moms that wear carriers. If they have older kids, because they can bring up to age 3. If they have toddlers, toddlers will just kind of run around. I had a couple kiddos like using weights themselves. A
Cute.
couple moms like brought a bouncer, so their babies weren't a bouncer, or they'll even just carry them in the car seat and they'll
Yeah.
like use their baby as weight. So I really give them the freedom to kind of do whatever they want when it comes to carrying the babies. But yeah, they're
Cool.
super.
Is it once a week, twice a week?
So right now they're once a week, and that's what I normally do. Twice a week seems like a big commitment for a lot of
Yeah.
the moms with, multiple kiddos. So it's
Yeah.
once a week right now. This first group is every Thursday, and then it's going to go to every Tuesday. Whenever this episode airs, that obviously might not still be the case, but I do these a couple times a year. So if people are interested, there will be more coming.
Yeah, go check them out. It's super fun.
It's fun. Okay, give us your life update. What's new?
Well, if you listen to the last episode, I talked about pregnancy, first trimester, all that jazz. A big symptom that I've been experiencing like throughout this entire time, including I'm almost 17 weeks tomorrow, is insomnia. And it's waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to go back to sleep. It's not as bad as like some ladies have pregnancy insomnia where it's like they're up for hours. Like I've only had that a couple times. But it's been a symptom that has been with me from the get-go. And I normally sleep very, very well. Like sleeping's my superpower. I often say as a practitioner, like sleeping is my superpower for my clients. Like I can get people to sleep really, really well. So not having sleep is definitely like everyone likes to joke like, oh, it's just prepping you for the babies here. I'm like, I don't need to prep this early. Thank you, buddy. But I don't need
You need
this
like
many
sleep
months.
storage. You need to be building up the sleep
Yeah.
storage.
I'm like, can I like build up the deficit rather than like start 9 months in advance? But anyways, I think I mentioned it last episode, but eating, surprise, surprise, has made a big difference for me. And I think I just actually kind of figured it out. Like this week, I met with my midwife on Monday and we were talking about like how much to eat in the evenings and stuff like that because we went out to eat last Friday and I had a burger that was probably like 1,000 calories and I slept so good that night. Oh my God. And I was like, okay, there's clearly something here. I'm clearly like needing more food. So, anyways, I am basically increasing fat a lot throughout the day. I'm adding like a fatty meat with breakfast. So, like a breakfast sausage or like an 80/20 hamburger patty is what I had with breakfast today. And my breakfast, I'm bringing it to like 700 to 800 calories. I feel like I normally would probably fall between 500 and 700 depending on what I was having. Um, and I'm like in second trimester now, just so you guys know for like caloric intake and stuff. Like you typically need to increase at that point. And then dinner last night it was probably between 1,000 and 1,200 calories. And I slept so much better last night and I have so much more energy today. My cat actually woke us up, I think like 3 or 4 times last night, and I still was able to go back to sleep. And I feel better than I did other nights when I woke up just once, but it was my body waking me up. So, anyways, if you struggle with pregnancy insomnia, even if it's like a lot of ladies are like, oh, it got better in second trimester. I feel like mine actually almost got worse in second trimester. And I think it's because I was even more in a caloric deficit on accident. And my body was just kind of like running on empty and constantly starving. So like today is like one of my first days that I'm not like absolutely feel like a teenager. Like I can't eat enough food. It's like I'm feeling so much better. So that's a little like pregnancy like life update for me.
It's
Um,
kind of crazy though when you say like 1,000 to 1,200 calories, and
yeah.
I'm sure people listening are like, "Wait, how
What?
much in one meal?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but that's what your body needs,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's what
And
actually makes you and baby like sustained and feel
yeah.
good,
Yeah.
satiated.
Totally. And point of reference, just so you know, like Wild Muse and I think Fierce Not Fragile, like we recommend 12, sorry, not 12, 2,000 calories at minimum for majority of women, unless you're like 4'10" and you weigh like 80 pounds. Like even then probably still would benefit from 2,000 calories. Most women need 2,000 calories at a minimum. I would say like my maintenance caloric intakes are on 2,500 calories. When I got pregnant, that definitely I think needed to be a little bit higher. And then I don't think I adjusted enough when I got into second trimester. And that's when I like started experiencing like 4 a.m. wake ups. I went a 10-day period where I woke up at 4 a.m. and I couldn't go back to sleep. And then I would like finally almost go back to sleep at like 6, and then our alarm goes off at 6. And it was just like I felt like a zombie.
He's like, I need food. Feed
Yeah,
me.
and my body was just wanting food. And I was like giving it little bites of food and stuff like that as snacks. Um, just kind of like because I was like, oh my God, I'm eating all the time. I don't even know what to do. But anyways, now I'm like really focusing. I was talking to Katrina and I talked to my midwife of like, okay, what do I do? And I'm now making sourdough bagels. I'm gonna have that with cream cheese at night before bed. We're having like sourdough pizza, like very high calorie foods, but still very nutrient dense. But yeah, you typically on average, like, so like let's say as a woman, you need between 2,000 and 2,500 calories on average. First trimester, they technically say that you don't need to increase. I beg to differ. Listen to your body. I was starving from the get-go, so I increased from the get-go. And then I think they recommend around 200 to 300 calories increase second,
200 to
and then
500.
another
Yeah.
200 to 500 in third. So that means in third trimester, guys, I'm going to be eating well over 3,000 calories. And then I am scared to breastfeed. Like, the
Oh, the
amount of food I'm
hungriness.
going to need.
Yeah, the hungriness during breastfeeding is wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think you point out something really important that I want everyone to listen to is that nutrient density makes a really,
Yeah.
really big difference. So like a lot of women, like I hear this from my clients, like I eat all the time so full, Amber, because they're eating a lot, but they're not eating nutrient dense foods. So like their body's just burning through stuff so much quicker and they're not staying satiated. That
Yeah.
makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I would say too, like a lot of the food choices that I choose slash what we recommend at Wild Muse is a lot of like easy to digest foods, and it's because a lot of us have had past gut issues. So it's a lot of like high quality dairy, fruits, root vegetables, proteins, white rice, stuff like that. Like absolutely still veggies and stuff like that, and still building that up. But like veggies don't slow things down enough. And that's what kind of like opened my eyes last Friday when I went and got a burger that was like filled with seed oils and like not super high quality, but I like was so much more satiated that I was like, okay, I have to start doing something a little different with my meals. And that's when like increasing fat and like getting good quality fats. And then I actually started increasing like fermented grains quite a bit too. Like I'm having a lot more of that now. So anyways, if this like relates, like if you relate to this at all, if it's interesting to you, you want help with any of this, Amber, and I could absolutely help you because it's important. Nutrient density, like nutrients are what we need in order to build a baby and in order to make hormones and just have a well-functioning body. So yeah, calories are important, but calories are like a category and the nutrients fall under that category. And the more nutrients we can get per calorie, the better off you're going to be. Hopefully that is clear and makes sense. But like nutrients are vitamins and minerals. And then macronutrients are proteins, fats, and carbs. We'll break this all down, I'm sure, in some episode. But yeah, the more nutrients you can get per calorie, the typically the better, and the more satiated and the more nourished your body will be.
Absolutely. All right. Good
Cool.
updates. All
Yeah,
right.
should we dive into
Dive
pelvic floor stuff, guys? This is also like I think she did. Was it like fall 2023 or so that you did the pelvic floor 101 call for my clients?
I think so. Probably.
So it's been wow,
A
a year and a
while.
half. Yeah, almost 2 years. Um, I was a fitness instructor for 5 years. Like I was in the fitness industry and she blew my mind on this call. And so that's why we wanted to do this episode because it's just like it's so important. And unless you have someone explain it to you, like Amber's gonna do for you, it's really hard to understand and it's not as clear and we don't get the importance of it. So really excited for this part.
Yeah, I could nerd out on the pelvic floor. Johanna and I were talking off camera before we started. I have a guide in front of me, you guys, to try and keep me focused because I could literally go so deep on this because I'm so passionate about the pelvic floor. And so I'm going to kind of work through what I think is most important when it comes to the pelvic floor. Johanna will pop in and ask questions as they pop up. But I want to start this off by just explaining why I'm so passionate about the pelvic floor. And that's really going to come from my own pelvic floor journey. So we're going to start there. Then I'll start breaking down the basics of like what the pelvic floor is and what I want you to know and all that good stuff. So, backstory for me, and we've touched on this a little bit in some episodes, but I have two kiddos. Emmy is 5. She was an emergency C-section. With my pregnancy with her, I lifted super heavy. I really didn't know much at all about the pelvic floor at that point, at least while I was pregnant with her. I started all of this journey right after Emmy was born, or right before, I should say. So I didn't really know what the pelvic floor was. I knew it was in my pelvis. That was pretty much all I knew. I kept lifting super heavy. I didn't know its role in breathing, which we'll talk about here in a couple minutes. I did really nothing different. And then what was supposed to be this beautiful all natural birth turned into an emergency C-section. I also didn't know when you have a C-section that you can still have pelvic floor dysfunction and that you still need pelvic floor rehab. I just assumed, well, a baby didn't come out of my vagina, so like, why do I need rehab? So that was kind of my first birth. With my second one, with Bo, I knew all sorts of things about the pelvic floor. So I did things very differently with my second one.
And
I thought
it was between Emmy and Bo that you
I
then
learned so
decided to become a personal trainer and do all this. So it was like that's why you didn't know anything, and it was really
yeah.
your first birth that was like the spark plug for all of this.
Yes, I appreciate you clarifying that. So yeah, I didn't start this business and this journey until after. So Emmy was the inspiration for this. My pregnancy, postpartum, emergency C-section, all of that is what sparked this because I started realizing how few women knew the stuff that I'm about to tell you, myself included. It's like that's where all of this was born. Born, that was a good pun right there. And so then Bo's birth came along and I did everything very different during his pregnancy. I worked on pelvic floor relaxation. I modified my workouts much more. I was much more in tune with my body the second time than I was the first time. And I again was going for this all natural birth. We'll do a whole episode going over birth stories because that's a whole nother can of worms. But anyway, again, was going for this all natural birth. I was going for a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean, or TOLAC. They have all these different names for them now.
What's
Right.
Tolak
So it's trial of labor after cesarean.
trial?
Trial.
It's almost like they're setting you up to fail.
That's exactly what it is. This could be a whole nother episode on its own.
Yeah, you guys, we're gonna have a birth episode towards the end of this season,
Yeah,
and we will be diving into all of
for
that.
sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's insane. The
Yeah.
fact that like VBAC is like already like such almost like a stigma, and then they add that.
Mhm.
Ooh,
I know. It's annoying.
rude.
So I did get a successful vaginal birth after Bo. However, a lot of things did not go as I would have liked.
I want to add successful as in it happened.
Yes, I got a vaginal birth.
Yes.
Was it successful as in like it was the birth I would have wanted? No.
Absolutely not.
The outcomes were quite poor, to be completely honest. Thankfully, Bo was safe. I was
Not
very
safe.
injured, but I was alive. Um, so
Alive. Oh my God. I was very injured, but alive. Like, what a way. Wow.
yeah,
I know.
to give you
Traumatic.
like the real quick and
Yeah.
dirty, I hemorrhaged, I tore so bad, and then ended up with pelvic organ prolapse.
I
So
want to, I, I want to like rewind a little bit
go ahead.
and because I do want you to explain a little bit about what got you there because what I
Okay.
don't want is someone to hear I tried to do a VBAC and then I hemorrhaged and tore and blah blah blah. You know, and that's going to happen to everyone that gets VBAC because that's not necessarily like you're a doctor, like there was a lot at play
A
here and
lot.
this is why we want to do a birth episode because there's so much more going on
Oh, for sure.
in the birth world than I think what we realize, especially if you don't have a lot of the education, just because it's not readily available. So I want you to like rewind a little bit and talk about like even like things that may have like set you up, even like early, like first trimester, second trimester, like things that like your doctor had said that like made you feel a certain way about going to this birth, the way that she and you guys like had a relationship just kind of like give ladies that background because I don't want people to think that VBACs aren't possible or that they're going to lead to hemorrhage or tearing or the doctor having to hold your bladder.
Yeah. So I am very much an anomaly. Like my
Yeah.
birth is not how most VBACs go. There is so many beautiful, incredible VBACs that happen. So yes, I definitely want you ladies to hear that. So the first thing for me with the particular practice I went with, and this is relatively common when it comes to OBs, I loved my OB. She was incredible, but she was more than likely not going to be the one that delivered. So I built this amazing relationship with this provider who was incredibly VBAC friendly, which is one thing I do really want everyone listening to listen to is like, if you are thinking you want a VBAC, finding the right provider is so important. And finding someone that is VBAC friendly versus VBAC tolerant is
Mhm.
a big difference. So,
And hospital or midwife, like home
yes.
birth midwife or birth
Yeah.
center, like trying to find whatever you
Find
want
someone, yeah, find
and
someone that
find
meets the
someone.
needs that you want, that's in
Yeah.
align with your desires and all that good stuff. So I loved my provider. However, I knew there was a high likelihood that she would not be the one that was going to deliver. So,
Why was that, if you don't mind sharing?
so one, Bo was due the week of Christmas.
Okay.
She was off for like
Okay.
almost all of that month.
Okay.
So if we fast forward to like towards the end when we knew I was getting close to delivering, um, we had started having the discussion of like, she was saying I more than likely won't be here. So we were like pulling up the list of like who's on call. I was asking like who practices like you, who is VBAC friendly, who's not, that whole conversation. And so there was only a few providers that I really felt confident helping with my birth. But again, this was like kind of out of my control. I couldn't pick who was there. So that was one hard thing for me. So of course, when I did go into labor, and I have what was called premature rupture of membrane. So my water broke, but I was not in labor. There was no contractions. Nothing was
How long did they give you though?
progressing. So the actual research shows most women go into labor within 48 hours.
Yes.
I called, and I knew this. I called the OB hotline or whatever when my water broke. And there's an acronym called TACO. It stands for time, amount, color, odor. Remember that. It's very important, guys. I knew this whole acronym. I knew what to look for. I knew my amniotic fluid was clear. There was no smell. There was no bleeding. There was no meconium. Like, baby was fine, right? I was fine, but there was no contraction. So I called the hotline and the OB on call was like, okay, so you're not having contractions. Like, here's your options. You're a VBAC, so you can come in for a C-section if you want. We can just like get you in. And I was like, no, I'm good. And then she was like, okay, or you can come in, we can start Pitocin, like get things rolling. I was like, no, I'm also good. I really want a natural birth. Like, I don't want to go for that. And so she said, okay, well, your other option is you can wait till 6 p.m. tonight. And then you need to come in because like we're really worried about like risk of infections and all this stuff.
And this is where I want to add. So you didn't technically even have premature rupture of membranes. They just didn't give you enough time to see if contractions were going to start,
So it's
right?
technically no. So it's called premature rupture of membranes no matter what. If
Okay, I
you get
guess
contractions.
not using medical lingo, because
Yeah,
like not using, so like, yes, medical lingo, you had premature rupture of membranes, right? But we know physiologically
I could have
that
gone into labor.
your waters could have been open. 2 days is what research is showing. And then there's like other like anecdotal evidence of like 4 days, 5 days, and things are fine as long as you don't have odors and other
Yep.
things going on, you know? So I just want to clarify that because I don't want someone to think of like she had premature rupture of membranes and that's bad before having contractions. It's like they didn't even give you enough time to see if you were going to have contractions
Absolutely.
because they were rushing you at 6 p.m. that night.
Yep. Yep. And you could just like tell by the doctor's bedside manner, even just on the phone, that like she really wanted me to just say, I'll come in for a C-section. And that was not something I was going to do. So I stayed home until 6 p.m. that night, went in, and her lovely bedside manner kind of continued. And for anyone that has been in this situation where you're just getting pressure from the providers, you don't really feel seen and heard, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And so from the get-go, when we got to the hospital, it just was not a great atmosphere. They were immediately wanting to push Pitocin. They wanted to get me in a bed. They wanted to get me where I wasn't moving and getting fluids and all these things. And so if I could go back, I would do a lot of things different. Obviously, I could play the what if game forever, but I did end up getting Pitocin around 8 o'clock. Almost instantly with Pitocin, I know my body and I'm very much a hyper responder to medication. So I went from like no contractions to the most intense contractions ever, every minute on the minute with no break. So very quickly, what I thought was going to be this beautiful natural birth turned into, oh my gosh, I literally can't breathe. I can't stand up. Like it was pretty scary and it was a lot. So ended up with an epidural, got stuck in the bed, like total
And
opposite.
normally that time frame is over
It
hours
usually takes a long time.
for
And I
ladies
was
that
on the
don't know
small, yeah,
birth.
and I was on
Yeah.
the smallest dose of Pitocin I could possibly be on. But I
Yeah.
knew, and I told them how much of a hyper responder I was. But again, if you've been in a hospital setting like that, they kind of look at you like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
sure you are. So anyway, I got the epidural. I'm obviously then stuck in a bed. My son's heart did not respond well to the Pitocin at all. So his heart
And
was like all over. Go ahead.
this OB was the one that was on call. It's not
Correct.
one of the ones that your OB recommended. It was just like who you had, correct? Okay. I just wanted to clarify
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And
It
this
was
is who you ended up delivering with too,
no.
correct? Okay.
There's a shift change.
Okay.
The story even better.
Yeah.
So again, I get on the Pitocin, my son's heart starts freaking out. Again, immediately the conversation is like, stuff needs to hurry up. We need to move to C-section. I was like, I'm not doing a C-section. So we could get to positions where Bo's heart would stabilize. He'd be okay. But I was pretty limited. I couldn't go onto all fours. His heart would freak. I could really only be on like slightly on my side. If you know anything about labor progression, the more you move, the better off baby's positioning is, the more labor progresses. So stuff was just taking a really, really long time. So I labored all night long. And then finally the next morning, there was a shift change at around 7 the next morning, I want to say. And it was a long, long night. There was very little sleep, so I'm exhausted. They don't let you eat in the hospital. So like Sai was sneaking me little bites of things, but then you get like judgment from the nurses for the fact that you're eating. It's all related to hospital policy. So I just felt like garbage. I was dehydrated. I hadn't ate enough. And finally around 9 the next morning, I couldn't push the Pitocin or the Pitocin, the epidural button enough. Like I was having so much pressure and I was like, I need to push. And so the doctor comes in and she's like, sure enough, like you're fully effaced, fully dilated, like let's start pushing. So we start pushing. Of course, I'm flat on my back. Legs are out wide. Again, everything that I had said I wasn't going to do. But Bo's heart was absolutely freaking out. If you've ever been in a situation like this, everything you learned goes out the window. This is why
You
I'm,
go into survival
yeah,
mode.
you go into
You
survival mode.
can't think clearly.
No, this is why I'm such an advocate for doulas. If I could do mine over, I would have a doula without a doubt. Anyway, everything you practice goes out the window. So I'm flat on my back, my knees are wide, the whole thing. Bo's heart is just like freaking out. Bo comes out part way. The girl pushes him back in, which
The OB.
the OB pushes Bo back in, tells me to stop pushing. If you've ever been in labor and been told to stop pushing, it's the most insane thing to tell someone whose uterus is literally trying to push the baby out.
It's like telling someone to stop puking halfway through puking. You
Exactly.
can't
So
stop it.
can't stop. So
What
I'm
was her reasoning for pushing him back in? Do you know?
wanting his heart to calm down. So she thought having him partway out and like constricting him too much was putting more pressure on him. So she like
Okay.
pushed him back in. His heart did calm down. So then we sit there for a few minutes with just me trying everything I possibly can, which really is out of my control to not push. And she looks at me and she said, all right, here's what your deal is, Amber. You have 2 pushes to get this baby out. If you don't get him out, I'm going to vacuum him out and you're going to tear substantially. Option 2, we're going to go to the OR and you're going to have a C-section. And I'm like, he's right freaking
Yeah,
there.
like you can't, I don't think you can even have a C-section at that point.
You can, but it is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And the risk of baby getting hurt is very
She
high.
was already out.
It's very dangerous. Yeah. And I knew this. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing
That's
that.
not an option.
No. So at this point, all like sane logic is pretty much out of my head at this point. All I freaking care about is that my baby comes out and that he's okay. So like, did I care a ton about my pelvic floor at that point?
No.
No. We know that the pelvic floor does not push the baby out. The pelvic floor is supposed to lengthen, relax, and get the heck out of the way. There's also different types of breathing patterns you can do during labor. Well, I went for what's called purple pushing, where you basically hold your breath, you push as hard as you can, which is a very powerful push, but it also puts a ton of strain on the pelvic floor. I pushed Bo out in 2 pushes, which is way faster than you want. Like fast labor is not always a good thing. So like
No.
nothing had time to stretch. So I tore so substantially to the point that the provider was holding my bladder in her hand. So if anyone knows anything about the pelvic floor, which we're going to explain here soon, it's a series of muscles that spans across the pelvis, right? So the pelvic floor sits in front, and then like your bladder and stuff is up behind it. So I basically blew out, if you like pictured like curtains that were closed, the curtains like tore so you could like see into my abdominal cavity essentially. Yeah. So long story short, I tore terribly, hemorrhaged, the whole thing, ended up with 3 levels of pelvic organ prolapse. I'm not going to go into real big depth on pelvic organ prolapse in this episode because that could be like a whole thing on itself. But basically, my pelvic organs, my bladder, bowels, and uterus were descending further down into my vaginal cavity than they should have been, which leads to a whole series of symptoms from pelvic heaviness. I couldn't rock bow for the first couple of weeks. I was in so much pain. I every time I had a bowel movement, I cried because it was so painful. I was so uncomfortable. I was just absolutely miserable. So this whole situation just lit me on fire for how important it is for women to know more about the pelvic floor, how to
Yeah.
prevent or decrease your chance of stuff like this, and just have knowledge through all stages of womanhood. And again, I say womanhood because I don't want this to be something that people are like, I just need to wait till I'm a mom. This is stuff that needs to be known for everybody through all of womanhood. So that's kind of what brings us to the pelvic floor episode and why we're here. So now I'm gonna break down like what the pelvic floor is and what we really want you to know. Is there anything you want me to add to that before I dive into that?
No, I feel like that was
You're
great.
good?
I guess and thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot more going into it besides just I was a VBAC and I hemorrhaged
Yep.
and split open, basically. Like there was a lot that led into it. In our birth episode, we'll talk even more about like why that can happen in the hospital setting, and like how to navigate a hospital setting if that is something that you do want to do, and then other options as well. So we will touch on that a lot because I think that's very important information to talk about. Because I feel like in this situation, and I don't know if you blame your body, I hope you don't, but I feel like a lot of women think I couldn't do it. It was my body that was the issue, blah, 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 because that's how that situation kind of can come across, unfortunately, where your body was just trying to do the best that it could. And there was a lot of intervention,
Oh
which
yeah.
then led to this outcome. And I just
Yep.
want like that to be very, very clear that this was not Amber's body failing. This is not a body malfunction. There was a lot of things at play here, which then can cause a lot of issues and pelvic floor issues, which is why I think there's so many women with so many pelvic floor issues as well.
Yep. Yep. And there's like I said, when we do our birth episode, I can give you guys so much more details. I mean, I gave you like a snippet of the whole story. The provider's been let go. She doesn't even work at the hospital where she's been fired because of so many births ending similar to mine. So yeah, I was like the perfect storm. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'm going to dive in because I feel like I have a lot to go through too, and I want to really educate you guys on this. So I'm going to start with what the pelvic floor is. As you're sitting there listening to this, I literally ask everyone this question, like scale 1 to 5, how much do you feel like you know and understand the pelvic floor? So I really want you to have that number in your head as we're starting, and then I'll want you to then think about it again at the end, and I hope your number does go up as far as how much you feel like you know. So the pelvic floor is a group of muscles that spans all the way across our pelvis. It goes from sit bone, all the way to the pubic bone, and then all the way back to your SI joint or tailbone in the back. So I like to think of it as like, I think that the easiest example is like a trampoline. So it extends all the way across, and it supports your pelvic organs and your pelvis. So
It almost makes me think about, remember in PE when we would hold the
uh-huh,
big
I know what you're talking about.
parachute thing and all the kids are attached to it? Like
Yep.
all the kids would be your bones, your hip
Yep.
bones and your pelvis, and then your pelvic floor is that trampoline, and you can go up with it and you can go down with it.
Mhm. Well, it's
Um,
even a better example because like when we used to play that, you'd put like balls in the middle and like throw them
yeah.
down, and that's like what your pelvic organs do. Your
Yeah.
pelvic organs are supported by this trampoline, or you could some people even think about it like a hammock. Your
Mhm.
pelvic organs sit on there and support it. There are ligaments and fascia and things like that. For this episode, we're specifically focusing on the pelvic floor muscles themselves. So when we talk about the pelvic organs, that would be like your bladder, your bowels, and your uterus are all supported by the pelvic floor muscles. So the pelvic floor is literally working for you all day long. Like it never takes a break. If you're walking, it's working. If you're sitting here, it's helping you not pee and poop your pants. So it does so many things. It also plays a huge role in breathing. So when we take like an inhale, for example, your pelvic floor in an ideal world relaxes and lengthens. Your belly expands, your pelvic floor drops down. Then when you exhale, the whole system comes back up. So we call it like the core canister. For a lot of women, especially if we have any pelvic floor dysfunction or even just pregnancy and postpartum can cause this, your breathing pattern gets interrupted to where it's not working in unison like it should. So it plays a huge role in breathing. It does play a sexual function. It also plays a big role in birth and pregnancy, obviously. As your uterus and baby grow, the pelvic floor takes more weight and needs to support your body more. And then, like I already mentioned, when it comes to actually pushing your baby out and even just baby descending into the pelvis, your pelvic floor has to lengthen and relax. It does not push baby out. It actually expands or lengthens up to 250 times its normal size to make room and space for baby to then exit.
It
So,
opens like it's kind of like
oh,
a
yep,
bagel, like the center is going to open and
yep,
expand to go out.
yep, exactly. It gets much, much larger, so there's space for baby. So, bladder and bowel control, huge. Breathing, sexual function, supporting the pelvis. It does play a little bit of what we call sump pump also, so it does help with like moving fluids and bloods and things like that out through the pelvis as well. So those are kind of the main functions. The biggest reasons that I want you guys to know about the pelvic floor is because when we don't care for our pelvic floor, there are so many symptoms that can arise, which I'm going to go into now. And a lot of us, I think, are told that the pelvic floor is something that you deal with when you're an old lady, or it's
Mhm.
something you deal with when you're done having kids, or it's something you only deal with when you have problems. But that would be like choosing to neglect any other muscle group. This would be like being like, glutes, I don't need them. My abdominals, I don't need them. I'll deal with them later. Like that's what we've done to a specific muscle group, and it's a muscle group that does so many things for us. So that's why it's so important. It literally works every single day. It has so many functions. And the more you take care of it and are proactive now, the better off you're going to be now and years down the road. Tracking so far?
Yeah.
Good. Anything you want to add to that piece before I jump into signs of pelvic floor dysfunction?
No, the only thing that I want to say about the signs of pelvic floor dysfunction is this is not just women. This is kids, this is
Everybody.
men, this is every single human, every
Yep.
body. So when you're going through that, like for ladies that are listening, like if your husband has a lot of low back pain, hip pain, hernias are really common, constipation, anything like that, she's going to talk about that. But like if your husband or your kiddo is struggling with these things, like it could absolutely be pelvic floor issues.
Yep. And that's a really good thing to highlight right now, too. As a mom myself, we already see some pelvic floor stuff showing up in my daughter. So Emmy struggles with a lot of, you could call it constipation, where she just struggles to have bowel movements. And a lot of that we've noticed is stemming from my husband. He constantly clenches his booty all the time and has similar issues. Sorry, if you didn't want me sharing that, I already did.
I'm just thinking like Emmy's gonna listen to this in 10 years and be like, Mom, why'd you share that with
Oh,
everyone?
and Emmy deals with a similar thing. So a lot of the breath work stuff that I cue for myself and for my own clients, I cue for Emmy. So Emmy's now started practicing like, Mommy, how do I relax my body when I'm having a bowel movement? So even as moms are listening and they're thinking about like potty training their kiddo, what do we tell a lot of times we tell our kids? We tell our kids to push your
Yeah.
we don't want to do that. So you actually want to tell your kids like let the poop slide out to where it's relaxing. Pooping should ideally be passive. It's
Hmm.
not a thing where we're pushing. If we push, like if you guys practice, if you're listening, like pause for a second and think of pushing. If you push, your butthole tightens, right? If you like exhale and relax or inhale, the muscles relax, and that's what you want. So yeah, really
Want
good.
to open.
You want it to open. Yeah. Okay. So common signs of pelvic floor dysfunction. I'm going to jump into that and I'll talk about what we ideally want to see with the pelvic floor because I think a lot of people don't fully understand this part either. So common symptoms that something is off with your pelvic floor. Low back and hip pain, very, very common. Constipation. And it doesn't even have to be constipation to the point that like you're skipping days of pooping. It could even just be that you're having to bear down a lot or not feeling emptied. It's just difficulty. If you're really having to work to go poop, there's something off. Leaking, and leaking isn't just urine. Leaking can be feces, it can be gas, it can be queefing. Anything you don't want coming out that's coming out down there, is typically a sign there's something off with the pelvic floor. Difficulty with intimacy. So orgasms, just having pain with intercourse. It can even be things as like difficulty with tampons, menstrual cups, whether it's painful, they don't stay in, they're uncomfortable, also can be a sign of pelvic floor dysfunction. This is an interesting one too that a lot of people don't think of is rib flare and breathing dysfunction. So when we have stuff that's going on with our ribs or we're not breathing properly, that also impacts the pelvic floor substantially. UTI symptoms. This is a really, really important one because I don't know how many women think they have UTIs often when really it's related to pelvic floor tension typically. So this could be urgency, this could be burning, it could be feeling like you need to empty all the time and you just can't fully empty. Again, can point to pelvic floor tightness and or weakness.
Why would burning
So
be
if
connected?
you are having a lot of pelvic floor tension, the pelvic floor muscles surrounding the urethra. And so if you're not able to fully relax the pelvic floor, it can actually cause burning sensation when you're trying to have,
Okay.
I was going to say bowel movement, when you're trying to go pee. Yeah. Pelvic heaviness and pressure. This is typically related to pelvic organ prolapse. That's like the signature symptom of pelvic organ prolapse is pelvic heaviness. The best way to explain this is think about what it feels like when a tampon is slightly falling out and you feel like you need to keep pushing it in. That's what it tends to feel like when you're having prolapse or pelvic heaviness. And then obviously pelvic organ prolapse itself. There are more symptoms. This is the most common. It would be quite an exhaustive list if I gave you everything. So if you didn't hear a symptom and you're maybe experiencing it, doesn't mean that you don't. I just didn't list literally everything that's on here. Good on that? Yeah? Okay. Now I want to talk about what our goal is with the pelvic floor because a lot of us here, okay, I want to have no symptoms. Obviously that's a goal, right? Or I want to have a tight pelvic floor or I don't have too weak of a pelvic floor. Our goal is to have what we call a functional pelvic floor. A functional pelvic floor is a pelvic floor that can both contract and relax. Okay? So now knowing that, I'm going to explain the two most common types of pelvic floor dysfunction because it plays into that. So the two most common kinds are what we call hypertonic or hypotonic pelvic floor. Okay? A hypertonic pelvic floor is a trampoline where the springs are way too tight. Okay? So you guys know when you jump on a tight trampoline, it double bounces you? That's kind of what we're dealing with, a really tight pelvic floor. However, a tight pelvic floor are muscles that are chronically tight. Muscles that are chronically tight get weak. So you can have a tight pelvic floor, but it still be a very weak pelvic floor. Okay. The flip side is a trampoline where the springs are way too loose. Okay. This is a weak or hypotonic pelvic floor. So they both, which is kind of complicated, have very similar symptoms. What we want to get to is a trampoline that's just the right tightness. It can relax and allow you to jump gently, but it can also be contracted enough that it can support you when needed. So when you cough, when you sneeze, when you jump, when you run, when you do all of these things, it can respond in a way that's functional versus leading to symptoms. Okay. Now, one thing I want to dive into with this is when we talk about a hypertonic pelvic floor, because this is the most common, specifically in go, go, go busy women, not even just moms, we tend to see more of the hypertonic or tight pelvic floor. The most common symptoms we see in this, and I'm sure a lot of you listening are gonna be like, oh, that's me. It's me for sure. We see things in our certain habits and posture, specifically booty clenching. So we often see this where you'll tuck your booty under you and kind of arch your back a little bit. So you're going into like a pelvic tilt and you're holding tension in the glutes. The reason this is not ideal is because when you clench your glutes, you're also clenching the posterior pelvic floor muscles. The best example I can give is imagine walking around flexing your bicep all day long. Okay, this is what we're doing with our glutes. So you clench your bicep all day long. And then let's say you drop something and you go to pick it up. Your bicep's not going to respond the way that you would like it to. Your pelvic floor can be the same way. So if it's constantly clenched and tight and then you sneeze, it's super fatigued and it's super tired. So what's probably going to happen? You're probably going to leak. Or if it's super tight and super weak, maybe it's going to cause hip pain or low back pain or something like that because it's just so dang tired. Other thing we see is sucking your tummy in all the time. This is super, super common because we just live in a world where women are told, like, suck it in, look skinny. And so many of us, high-waisted pants also play a role into this too, especially really compressive ones. So be careful about the compression of the pants you're wearing. We just see women that are constantly sucking it in. When you're constantly sucking it in, if you just practice sucking in right now, it puts pressure down on that pelvic floor. So again, the muscles are having to respond and clench and hold more tension because there's being pressure put down on them.
I have a question about the
That's
sucking
why.
your tummy in.
Uh-huh.
So I've seen like two things with that. Like if you have a line above your belly button, that's a sign that you suck it in quite a lot, and I have that.
Mhm.
And then if you have like a B shape, like if you turn profile to the mirror and your stomach kind of looks like a B, like a capital B, like there's like a little bit of a bump and then like a bigger bump underneath your stomach, or those are there any like those are two signs of like that you've been sucking your stomach in probably for a long time. Are
Can
there
be.
any other like visual, because I feel like I was always like, well, I'm not sucking my stomach in, I'm just engaging my core.
Yep.
So like, but I feel like the visual thing where I could like see it in a mirror, like, oh no, you have a line above your belly button. We
I
need
think
to stop
another really
sucking.
common one too is what we call like ab gripping. So if you looked in the mirror and like it's kind of that B shape you're talking about, like your upper abs are really toned, but then you have more of like that pooch. It's
Hmm.
usually a sign that you've been engaging for a really long time and then pressure is being pushed out. So
Yeah.
this is where there's a big difference between engaging your core and sucking it in.
Yeah.
Most of us have been sucking it in for a really, really long time. The it's hard for me to say that like yes, seeing the line or like the B is for sure that's what you're doing. The
Yeah.
most common thing I have clients do is I'll tell them, let your belly go. And they're like, what? And I'm like, just let your belly look like a belly.
Yeah.
Because when you just let your belly look like a belly and like relax, most people immediately are like, that feels weird. Like, I don't like doing that. And
Yeah.
that's usually a sign that, like, oh crap, you've been sucking in for so long that you don't even know what it looks like to have a normal belly. As women, most of us are not designed to have this just super flat belly. We have a uterus, we have organs. Like, we're supposed to have some shape to our belly. So if you sit here and you listen, and I just say, let your belly go, and you're like, oh, okay. That's what it's supposed to look like. You're probably sucking your tummy in more than you realize. And there's a big difference between bracing your core
Mhm.
and sucking in.
I also feel like there's a difference between engaging your core and clenching your core.
100%.
So I feel like when I was in fitness, like a lot of like Pilates and they might like have really good intentions for teaching this, but it was like engage your core and it was
Yep.
like you're like you're not bearing down necessarily, but you're just like clench, squeeze.
So what
And
I
when
tell my
I
gals is exhale on exertion and think
yeah,
of bringing your hip bones together. When
yeah,
you think of bringing your hip bones together, it automatically cues you to also engage the pelvic floor because the core and pelvic floor should engage together,
yeah,
not separately. So if you think of hip bones, it engages like the TAs and all your muscles, which is transverse abdominis. It all comes in together as like a system versus just,
yeah,
suck it in and clench and stuff like that. So
yeah. And I think that's probably why so many women, even if you're doing core exercises and you're quote unquote engaging, but you're really clenching or sucking it in, you're not actually engaging your entire like core muscles and stuff. So then you still have low back pain and stuff like that with those exercises.
absolutely. And a lot of the times too, we're missing the pelvic floor part. So if you're just engaging your core and you're not also doing the pelvic floor together, you're typically bearing down. So this is why during certain core movements, so people will be like, well, I leaked or I had pelvic heaviness. And it's because the system's not working together. Ideally, when you engage your core, the pelvic floor also comes up versus a lot of us will bear down into the pelvic floor when we engage our core. So then we're causing symptoms that way too. So,
Should you, and I'm sure it's probably kind of like more like altogether cohesive, but should you try to almost like engage lower abs then work up? Because I feel like
make
a
your
lot of
elbow.
us
Yep.
engage up to down.
Yep. Think of a zipper.
So
So
we
I
almost
tell
need to like
people,
lift up.
yep. Yep. So it should be like up and in with the pelvic floor. And then think of zipping from the bottom up, not the other way around. Because if you do the other way, that's where you go into more like the upper ab gripping. And
Yeah.
you'll see like a belly pooch where you're pushing pressure out
Yeah.
and the pelvic floor is not coming up. So yeah, think in and up with the pelvic floor and then zipping up from your pubic bone up to your sternum, not the other way around. Yeah.
I think that's helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna go into these are like the big hitters on what I really want women to know when it comes to the pelvic floor. Again, I feel like there's so much we could go into because the pelvic floor is such a big topic, but these are probably what I think is the most important thing for not even just women, but your kids, for to know for your spouses, for everybody to know. So, for the longest time, we've been led to believe that if a symptom is common, that it's normal. I'm going to use the example of leaking because I think that's one that's going to resonate with the most people. So for the longest time, we'd hear if you're leaking, it's a part of motherhood, or throw on a panty liner. It's just what happens once you have kids. Okay. It's a simple example. So we've then started to believe that if it's common, that it's not normal, meaning we just have to deal with it, or there's no treatment, there's no way to get rid of it. But common does not equal normal. If you are having symptoms, if you're listening to this episode and you're like, wow, I definitely have some of these things, there's so many ways to get help. Working with a pelvic floor PT, working with someone like me, or both, having a resource, talking to your midwife, whoever your healthcare provider is, finding someone that can give you the resources to get rid of these symptoms is super important. You do not have to suffer with these symptoms just because it's common. It's not normal.
It's
Any
very
symptom
similar
is
to
fine.
PMS.
Yes, it's a white flag from your body that, hey, something is off.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is really important is, and you brought this up in the beginning, we tend to blame our body and think our body's broken or our body's fragile or our body's failing us. If you switch that to my body is talking to me, my body is communicating to me, body is telling me something is off in the system, I think that's another really good way to look at it is, okay, my body is trying to give me feedback. What is it telling me? And just listening.
Symptoms are communication, and that's why
100%.
what you and I do is very different from a lot of common practices because a lot of common practices are focused on symptom eradication.
Yeah.
And that's probably why, like, even like Emsella, like, which is one of those like pelvic floor machines, like, that's very much so like focused on symptom eradication. It's not actually getting to the root cause.
Yep.
And I think like the root cause is like getting some flack recently of like, oh, it's impossible to find the root cause. And it's like, if someone's saying that, like, you clearly don't understand the
Yep.
body and what's going on because your body isn't having a symptom for no reason. Your body's not communicating to you for no reason. Your body's the smartest thing on this world. Like, there's no man that's smarter than our body, man or woman. So just know that just because you have a symptom, whether it's PMS or painful periods or leaking or constipation or gut issues or whatever it might be, if you've been told that it's common, therefore normal, you don't have to accept that, but it does take work finding the right provider that's going to help you get to the root and get you symptom relief that's long lasting because you got to the root, because you listened to your body. We're not just like band-aiding and masking symptoms.
Yep. This is a perfect intro to something that I think we all need to hear also is just because the symptom is coming from your pelvic floor does not mean the pelvic floor is the problem. So pelvic floor is a part of our entire body, right? Just like if we use the example like an autoimmune disorder. I have Hashimoto's. My thyroid is the victim of my autoimmune disorder. My thyroid wasn't particularly what started the whole thing, right? It can be the same way with your pelvic floor. So this is where having an approach that is very full body can make such a difference. So if I bring a client on and all I focus on is their pelvic floor symptoms, but I neglect the fact that they're hardly sleeping, they're undernourished, they're stressed to the max, they're not well supported at home, maybe they have financial stress, social stress, you name it, and let's say they're not doing any sort of exercise, they're not doing any mindset stuff. If all of these other factors are at play, but all I focus on is like, let's do some Kegels, let's do some pelvic floor relaxation. Are they going to get some symptom relief? Maybe, but it's not going to fix the whole thing because we're not getting to the deeper root cause. The deeper root cause is all of the other things that I mentioned. And that way, specifically for me in Fierce Not Fragile, I'm going to look at the entire picture. I'm going to ask all the TMI questions. I literally want to know everything so that I can then make a comprehensive plan that's going to address you as an entire human, not just your pelvic floor. So, yeah, it's a
And this
full
is why we co-practice together so well because
exactly,
you do
exactly.
that for the physical body
Yes,
and I do that for the internal like
yes. Yeah,
nutrients, thyroid issues, immune issues and stuff like that because it's
exactly.
so true. The body is like so complicated, but it's also so not complicated at the same
Mhm.
time.
Well, a lot of us just miss the basics, and
Yeah.
that's what we're really hammering is the basics. And this is a perfect transition too of why Kegels alone are not enough. So again, if you're listening and all you've been told is do Kegels, do Kegels, do Kegels. No one is trying to do you a disservice in telling you that. There is a place for Kegels, 100%. But Kegels alone are not enough. We have to look at the whole picture. One of the biggest things that I'm an advocate for the pelvic floor in particular, is a strong body hopefully leads to a strong pelvic floor. If we're doing things like strength training and working on all the other factors that I mentioned, the pelvic floor is going to follow suit. So Kegels alone should not be the solution. They're really just a band-aid, or even for some people, make their symptoms worse. So Kegels alone should not be the only thing we're doing when it comes to the pelvic floor. Okay, I'm going to hammer out these last few because we talk so long. Okay.
You and I? What?
I know, who would have guessed? Please do not wait until you have a problem or until you're done having kids before you address the pelvic floor. Just like we treat any other muscle group, your pelvic floor should be just as proactive and cared for as anything else. Mindset and the pelvic floor are besties. This really played into my story in particular. When you believe in the resiliency and the healing abilities and you trust your body, opposed to believing that it's fragile and broken and that it failed you, you will see such a transformation. This doesn't even have to be the pelvic floor. This could be back pain. This could be systemic disease, what have you. When we start changing our mindset to resiliency and healing, you will see such a change. And that was totally visible in my own story. In the beginning, when I was like, I was dealing with postpartum anxiety. I was so negative on myself. I was like, I did everything right, but everything went wrong. Like I was such in that negative headspace. And finally, when it clicked of like, if I just start believing, if my body could grow a human, why could it not heal my pelvic floor?
Mhm.
Everything changed. So your mindset and your pelvic floor make a huge difference. Um, Oh, this is a big one. Your pelvic floor does not push your baby out. I know I've said this before. I will say it again. Doing Kegels and practicing pushing as hard as you can with your pelvic floor is not going to be the thing that makes a difference when it comes to having a baby. You have got to learn what's called pelvic floor relaxation. You practice this through like diaphragmatic breathing, which is like down regulating the pelvic floor, learning to relax and lengthen is super, super, super important. I'm going to put in the notes of this episode in particular my video on pelvic floor relaxation that I do want everyone to watch. And you can practice it, start learning what that looks like when it comes to pelvic floor. Because I think that's one thing that literally everyone, not even just females, males as well, need to know because it impacts so many things. So,
I think with the pelvic floor and pushing your baby out, the word contractions also implies that your body is contracting to push the baby out. Where, yes, there is an aspect that your uterus is pushing the baby out, but it's actually like I heard, I can't remember if it was Dr. Stu or who it was, but it's really more of expansions, like
yep.
expand your body while you're having a surge to
Mhm.
allow the baby to pass through. Just like when you're pooping, you want to expand your sphincter to allow the stool to pass through. You don't want to contract and push hard. You want to allow things to open and pass through.
Yep.
Your uterus will do the pushing and push things out for you. So
Yeah.
I hope that's helpful with understanding why your
I
pelvic
always
floor doesn't push things out.
Yeah, I always tell clients to be like, the more upright and open you can be, the better off. We tend to go into this more like closed off space, and that's where things do get more constricted and closed and stuff like that. So, all right, guys, we just threw a lot at you when it comes to the pelvic floor. So I hope you're all still following along with us. I hope you took something very powerful and important out of this. If you were listening, you're like, okay, this is me. I hear this. What? I can't hear you. Oh,
There
there
we go.
you are.
Can you give us a couple of things, like four things of like how to
Yes.
support the pelvic floor real quick?
Takeaways. Oh, it's right there. It's because I didn't scroll down. That was weird. Your audio was funny.
I
Okay,
got you.
you're good. Okay. Four biggest takeaways for the pelvic floor. These are like tangible stuff that you guys can start implementing now. Strength train, strength train, strength train. I will hammer home strength training till I'm blue in the face because it is so important. And this doesn't have to be like go lift the heaviest weight you possibly can. Just start somewhere, start getting your body strong. I already said this once. Please practice and master pelvic floor relaxation. The ability to relax the pelvic floor is just as important as your ability to contract it. So please learn to relax your pelvic floor. Do not go into birth blind. Educate yourself, practice this stuff ahead of time. I literally have all my clients practice pelvic floor relaxation, breathing strategies, birth positions. The more you know going into birth, the better off your outcomes are going to be. And then practice healthy bladder and bowel habits. Pooping should mainly be passive. Hydration is essential. This is going to seem like kind of a random one, but it is also very important to bladder health. Johanna practices in it with her clients too. Coffee should come after food and ideally hydration. This plays a huge role into irritating your bladder. So a lot of women that have leaking and do have coffee or just even caffeine and carbonated stuff on an empty bladder and empty stomach do have a spike in symptoms. And then this one is also a really good one for everybody, especially if you're potty training kiddos. No more just in case pee. You train your bladder when you do the, oh, we're going to run out of the house. I got to go potty. Or, hey, we're going to be leaving. Can we go try and go pee? You start training your bladder that it needs to go more often. This can lead to more urgency issues. So those are my biggest takeaways. Got them all?
Awesome.
Now we're good?
Yeah.
Okay, so we will put some stuff in the notes of this so you guys have the relaxation video and stuff like that, because I really do want you to practice this. I think it's going to do a lot for you. The more you know, the more you practice, the more educated you are, the better off you're going to be. Anything I didn't cover that we need to cover?
No, I think you did. You did great. I just like in my own body, like understanding my pelvic floor has like helped so much. And it's something that I'm preparing like in pregnancy, like constantly remembering relax my pelvic floor when I inhale, you know, and allow it to do its thing when I exhale. And I just feel like it's something that's so, so important. It can really, really change birth for you.
I think paying attention to just your posture over the next couple days, looking for, am I clenching my booty? Am I clenching my jaw a lot? Am I holding a lot of tension? When we hold tension in other places in our body, we're more than likely also holding them in our pelvic floor. So one cue I give clients is shake it out. If you start noticing your body's really tense, literally shake it out, like have a mini dance party to let go of some of that tension. And even that by itself can give a big reduction in symptoms for a lot of women just by letting that tension go and relaxing your body a little bit. So pretty simple thing to just look into. All right.
Well, thank you. I hope this was helpful for you guys. And we will see you in our next episode. We'll try to keep them just a little bit shorter, but we like to talk.
We do. We'll see you in episode 5.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for hanging out with us on the Wild and Fierce podcast. If you loved this conversation, we'd be so grateful if you left a review and shared it with a friend who needs to hear this.
And if you really loved it, take a screenshot, share it on your stories, and tag us. We'd love to see it. Until next time, stay wild, stay fierce, and keep owning your journey.